For Troy!
Promise me you will come back.
What if I can't?
This'll be the greatest war the world has ever seen.
For Troy!
This war will never be forgotten.
You know what's there? Waiting beyond that beach. Immortality! Take it! It's yours!
Alright, let's compare Troy and the Odyssey. If you're trying to make a movie about the Trojan War, the first thing you have to wrap your head around is the sheer size of it. I mean, we're talking about a war that supposedly involved 1,000 ships and massive armies. How do you show that on a movie screen?
The vision of it all is, it's harsh sunlight, and you fight with your armor and you're sweating, and you feel that it's painful. That's what Hector says to Paris. He says, have you seen men dying? I have. It's nothing glorious about it. And our battles are not glorious.
Back in 2004, Wolfgang Petersen wanted to blow your mind with massive Hollywood grandeur. He built a massive gate and 500 feet of physical wall in Mexico that was up to 60 feet tall. But even a wall that big wasn't enough for his vision. He used CGI to digitally extend those walls for miles and to paste thousands of Greek ships into the ocean's horizon. And when the armies clashed, Petersen didn't just paint them in with computers. He actually had thousands of extras on set in full armor, colliding like a giant car crash.
I knew the story when I was 15, 16. At school we read the Iliad in ancient Greek. It totally knocked me out at that time.
Simon Crane, he was instrumental in getting these what I think amazingly choreographed battles together.
The work they've done in those battle scenes is just unbelievable.
The story is a love story, but above all, it's a war.
Now let's look at Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Nolan took a totally different path. Emboldened by his success, he got the budget for a massive canvas, absolutely refused to rely on computers to build his world. He didn't want a CGI fleet of thousands of ships or digital clone armies marching in the background. Instead, Nolan did everything practically. He took a real Viking ship and rebuilt it in Greek specifications, threw his actors on board and filmed them rowing on an actual ocean. Because of this, the Odyssey doesn't have those giant sweeping CGI shots of thousands of soldiers colliding. It lacks that artificial computer scale, but what you get instead is this incredibly tight, visceral and sweaty feeling.
What I found in the original poem was a very earthy sensibility. There's a lot of talk about how people eat and what they eat and how they live, and that's contrasted with the epic grandeur, of the story. And so I felt I wanted to be true to that, in a broader sense, and make something that was earthy and relatable and accessible. I wanted these to feel like people that we know. It's a story about family. It's a coming-of-age story of Telemachus. It's about a homecoming, and I wanted to make it really accessible and relatable, and not look back to sort of past Hollywood versions of how to take on the ancient world, but really try and just throw the audience into a world that they haven't lived in yet.
You're not looking at a digital painting, you're looking at real actors on real wood getting slammed by real freezing cold waves. Nolan used clever camera tricks instead of computers to make the action look mind-blowing.
There's no CG in a lot of the sequences, the action sequences. It's all legit, and it's all forced perspective and clever camera angles. And I know the sequence between the Lystragonians and Odysseus' men, I don't actually know how much we're supposed to talk about that stuff, but the way they shot that is so crazy. That's all real. The way you're seeing that in the film is what that looked like on the day. Yeah. And they built these special platforms that would move around this forest in Scotland to create this crazy depth perception thing. And just to think that far ahead, and to have the confidence to be have this crazy idea is remarkable.
I had actually, 20 years ago, I was briefly attached to direct Troy. the film that David Benioff had written based on the Iliad.
Yes, I read that. That was the Brad Pitt. It was.
Yeah.
There's a crazy difference in style. Petersen used the magic of early 2000s computers to give us the holy cow scale of a world war. It's awesome to look at, but it definitely feels like you're watching a movie.
I can't lose you. I won't survive.
No son of Troy will ever submit to a foreign ruler.
And every son of Troy shall die.
Nolan, on the other hand, wants you to feel like you are literally standing on the deck of the ship with Odysseus. He swaps the giant CGI wide shots for tight, practical angles that show the actual texture of the wood and the physical exhaustion on the actors' faces. Petersen gives us the giant landscape of a legendary war. Nolan gives us the raw, muddy reality of a crew just trying to survive the trip home.
Well, coming out of my last film, Oppenheimer, had way more success than I think we had any right to expect. And that gives you an opportunity to get something made that you might not otherwise be able to get made.
You would have had trouble, Christopher Nolan, after everything, after Interstellar, after Inception, after Memento, after Batman. You would have had trouble selling that had it not been for Oppenheimer?
I think it helped. That it was very successful.
You think the Oscar thing helped?
I think the Oscar thing helped. I think it all helped to go to the studio and say, because being the Odyssey, it needs a massive budget, it needs a massive cast, it needs a lot.
The crazy thing is, Brad Pitt didn't even want to make Troy in the first place. He basically owed Warner Brothers a movie because he had dropped out of another project, and Troy was his way of paying off that studio debt. But being the professional that he is, he still went all in. He trained for a year, quit smoking, and lived like a monk, just to get into character. But once they were shooting, he realized he hated the style. He had been spoiled working with directors like David Fincher, where things were dark, mysterious, and complex. Instead, Troy felt like this massive, brainless commercial product, where every single camera angle was just a hero shot designed to make him look pretty.
Let them say, I lived in the time of Achilles.
But Brad did get one massive win out of the film. He is the sole reason Eric Bana was cast as Hector. Brad was randomly watching a tiny, gritty Australian movie called Chopper, where Eric Bana, who was actually a comedian in Australia, played this terrifying, real-life criminal. Bana had completely transformed for that role, packing on weight, gold teeth, and fake tattoos. Brad loved the performance so much, he basically begged the director, Wolfgang Petersen, to hire Bana.
With Chopper, I, for some reason, just immediately felt like I could become him. That's my favourite part of the job, is going away and learning and doing the research, so that then when I walk on set, I'm prepared.
Wolfgang actually watched Chopper, and he was incredibly confused. He was like, why on earth would I cast a guy with a beer belly and gold teeth as a noble Trojan prince?
I'm a bloody disappointment to you, aren't I? Well, you've probably read all the newspaper stories about me, and you've heard the word on the street about me. I'm a bit of a bloody letdown to you.
But when Bana showed up in person, completely ripped and in shape, Wolfgang got the genius of it immediately.
Primarily for me about just pure leadership, like a man leading an army, and the army loving him, being the ultimate, type A warrior who had a heart as well.
Still, the commercial pressure of Troy was a massive wake-up call for Brad Pitt. He decided he was done doing shallow blockbusters just for the paycheck. He went on to found his own production company, Plan B, and used his star power to back highly specific, auteur-driven masterpieces that actually meant something, producing Oscar winners like 12 Years a Slave and Moonlight. This is what Brad Pitt said when he was describing it as a massive turning point. It was really a turn on Troy. I was disappointed in it. I could not get out of the middle of the frame. It was driving me crazy. I'd become spoiled working with David Fincher. But somewhere in it, Troy became a commercial kind of thing. Every shot was like, here's the hero. There was no mystery. So about that time, I made the decision I was only going to invest in quality stories, for lack of a better term.
I get in my way a lot, and it just seemed too obvious for a minute there.
It was the right moment for you to play that kind of role.
Well, it was. I sat the bench for a couple of years. I hadn't done anything, so I was anxious to take something on that would be a little more difficult. We get to throw everything in, and this one open that up.
This brings us to Christopher Nolan's ultimate triumph in 2026. Emboldened by the immense unexpected success of Oppenheimer, Nolan finally secured the vast resources and studio faith needed to realize his lifelong dream. He set out to make the Odyssey not as a commercial, hero-shot blockbuster, but as a gritty, deeply human journey of family, homecoming, and psychological reckoning. Filmed entirely on massive IMAX 65mm cameras, Nolan's film serves as a spiritual sequel to Oppenheimer, trading the physical theater of the Trojan War for an intimate, visceral exploration of what war does to men. So if you're making a massive ancient war movie, you can't just let your actors chill in air-conditioned trailers all day. You've got to make them suffer a bit to get those exhausted, sweaty performances that actually look real.
But really, in the case of Odysseus, what you're looking for is you need somebody who will take the audience on this journey. You need somebody who has that empathetic connection with the audience, but who also can be this iconic hero. And if you look at Matt, this is an incredible actor, incredible movie star, and he can be an accessible everyman. When he does things like The Martian, We Bought a Zoo, things like that. He's just this really likable, ordinary guy. And then he's Jason Bourne. And I needed both those things for Odysseus. And so with Matt, he's able to combine that iconic sort of superhero thing with a very, very emotionally accessible and comprehensible person. He can just take you into his dilemma, into his journey, and that makes it much more exciting for an audience.
But Wolfgang Petersen and Christopher Nolan had totally different ways of putting their actors through the ringer. For Troy, physical realism was all about the brutal, up-close stunt work. Brad Pitt and Eric Bana actually refused to use stunt doubles for their big, legendary duel. They wanted every shield block and sword swing to look like a real struggle for survival.
What matters is that I believe in what I'm doing. Because if I don't, I can't expect you to buy that for a second. And you won't buy that for a second. You'll see through that. So if I can just feel it myself and at least make what I'm doing convincing, I can't control a lot of the other elements, but I can at least hope that whilst I'm on screen, you at least believe what I'm doing. That's what's really important to me.
Because they were doing it themselves, they made a cash bet to keep things interesting. They bet $50 for every light accidental hit and $100 for every hard one. By the time those 6 days had wrapped, Brad Pitt owed Eric Bana $750, and Bana owed nothing. Bana was basically a ghost on that set, dodging every hit, while Brad was just throwing cash at him. But compare that to the Odyssey. Christopher Nolan didn't just want his actors to sweat during the sword fight. He wanted them to feel the relentless, bone-crunching exhaustion of actual Bronze Age sailors. Nolan got a real 100-ton wooden Viking ship from Norway and repurposed it as an ancient Greek warship. There was no green screens or fake treadmills here. The actors actually had to go to a literal rowing camp for months just to learn how to physically move this massive ship together on the open ocean. Matt Damon was pushed harder than he'd ever been in his life, but watching everyone else struggle with him kept him going.
And the Odyssey is really made in I suppose, a more old-fashioned way. We're certainly using computer graphics. We're certainly using all the tricks at our disposal because this is an epic with fantasy elements. But we try to keep the humanity behind everything. And, I think for the audience it makes a difference. I think people can tell when something has been done in some kind of more real way where we're all out there, on the deck of a real ship in a storm, or going into the Cyclops' cave for real, those kind of things. You just get textures and tactility, the appeal of the real world and real people in it. I think audiences are always going to crave that.
I've never been pushed that hard, but I could look around at every department and everybody was getting pushed, and there was this incredible energy I think we drew from one another. Watching, we were all experienced enough to know that what was being asked of us was basically everything we had and a little more.
It came at the perfect time in my life, and it did require kind of a comprehensive, I think for all of us, it was a 24-hour-a-day job.
This is a serious team-building exercise. But beyond the physical training, the actual filming locations were their own kind of torture. On Troy, the cast had to stand around in heavy Bronze Age armor in blistering desert heat of Mexico and Malta. It got so brutally hot in the sand that even massive 200-pound crew members were literally passing out on set. It was a massive physical battle just to keep the shoot going.
This was extremely difficult just because of the numbers of people, the locations where we were they were extremely hot, and the costumes that people were wearing.
It's got to be in the source material. It's hard to just construct it out of thin air. It has to be there on the page. But then you're trying to add to it, and then you're trying to work out a way of tapping into what's there and amplifying it, or coming up with a different version of it. A lot of it comes from conversations with the director, and you hope you're on the same page, and then just I think a lot of it's instinctual. I probably don't overthink it, to be honest. And then you got to get there on the day and have a play and try different things, and some things will work and some things won't, and you just got to experiment.
Shooting out at sea, which that's technically challenging for a bunch of reasons. So there's a boat ride to get to there was always a little journey to get to the place.
Instead of desert heat, Nolan's crew had to deal with the freezing ocean and steep cliffs. To shoot on location, the actors couldn't just walk out of a cozy trailer. They had to do a grueling 45-minute hike up steep goat paths, climbing 1,000 vertical feet in the morning just to start work. So here's the big takeaway. Wolfgang Petersen wanted to show you the chess match of combat, the split-second strategy of two legends trading blows on hot sand. It looks awesome.
I like the fighting in this film because it's quite brutal, and it's not like a martial art. There isn't an exact place to hit someone.
But everything's a kill shot. Just know everything is a kill shot.
Got it? For any sort of fight choreography, somebody getting hurt.
Oh, shit. Got it?
Pretty much all fight choreographers will avoid doing any attacks directly to the face. Obviously, we work with blunt weapons, but they would still hurt if they hit you.
Eric got hit, he got a bloody nose.
Essentially, you learn that you can never train too much, because ultimately the shoots are very long. And to get through it mentally and physically, you do need to be fit.
There's just no shade, and the sun is so intense, and then it's reflected off the ground as well, because it's all this stone. And then there were days when I would see 200-pound grips just do a header. It was not uncommon.
If you see the fight, you just can't believe that these are actors who are doing it. They're not stunt men hiding somewhere and they do it for the actors. It's the actors. They can be very proud of it, and I am too, for them. And if you talk about blood, sweat, and tears, about the reality of a fight.
Nolan, on the other hand, shot the Odyssey almost like a gritty survival documentary. He threw his actors directly into the wild wilderness, so they were actually fighting the sea, the wind, and their own limits. Petersen gave us the thrill of the duel. Nolan gave us the exhausting reality of trying to make it home. Now let's talk about the Trojan Horse. You can't tell this story without it, but the way Wolfgang Petersen and Christopher Nolan handled this giant wooden beast from two different angles. For Troy, Petersen wanted this massive, jaw-dropping Hollywood spectacle. They didn't just build a prop, they built a literal monument. His design team came up with this gigantic, 42-foot tall beast made of polystyrene and fiberglass. This thing was so heavy and huge, they had to design it like a giant Lego set so they could pull it apart and ship it across the Mediterranean, then all the way to Mexico. This is what the crew said about building this absolute monster.
Bob Ringwood came in with a very intriguing reference.
I also had a picture of this decomposed ship who just burnt and charred, and just Paul Catlin came up with what was best one. And the sculptor, Marty Smeaton, took the sketch and came up with a 12-inch maquette that was just fantastic.
After making a full-size sculpt in polystyrene, it's 42 feet high.
Since they built the sets out of real Maltese stone, stone doesn't exactly burn, so they had to build all these wooden market stalls and scaffolding just to have something to set on fire. When they finally lit the horse up, it was so intense, they had actual firemen standing by with hoses, ready to douse the set the second the director yelled cut.
It was absolutely breathtaking, the way the horse caught.
It's a classic, awesome Hollywood fire show. But now let's look at Nolan's. Nolan didn't care about making a shiny Hollywood prop. In fact, he had a completely different image stuck in his head for over 20 years. He wanted the Trojan Horse to look like a forgotten, ruined monument, half buried in the wet sand, getting pounded by the ocean waves, with no wheels at all. He wanted the Trojans to find it and think this is a real religious offering, not some obvious trap on wheels.
So I had to figure out, because the horse was in that script, even though it's not in the Iliad, they put it in the film. And so I had to sort of figure out, well, what's my approach to it? And I came up with this idea of the horse half buried in the sand, about to be destroyed or carried away by the waves, so that as the Trojans find it, the last thing it looks like, there's no wheels, it doesn't look like something that's meant to be carried into the city. And that image stuck with me for, decades.
But the real craziness happened when they went inside the horse. Nolan wanted the audience to feel the terrifying claustrophobia of being trapped in that dark, sweaty wooden box. He insisted on shooting everything practically with massive, heavy IMAX cameras. But there was a huge catch. IMAX cameras are incredibly loud. They sound like a running generator, so you had to wrap the camera in this giant 300-pound soundproofing box called a blimp. Because the box was so humongous, the actors physically couldn't look at each other. Nolan literally had to invent a crazy system of mirrors just so his actors could see each other and act.
Because when he told me we were going to do the whole thing in IMAX and that they'd built a blimp, the first thing I said was, well, the eye lines are going to be wrong. Right? So if here's your lens, if you and I are doing a scene and I'm shooting your close-up, and I'm the actor playing opposite you, I'm going to put my face as close to the lens as possible so your eyes are close to the lens, so that the camera gets both of your eyes. If there's a blimp around this giant IMAX camera, then I'm over here. Now what this is seeing is not both your eyes, it's almost like a profile like that. So the eye line is wrong. So Chris devised this mirror system whereby I could be the actor off camera for you, but I would look into a mirror that was here, that would come back to a mirror that was here, and you would see my full face right there. So you'd still feel the actor and know that they were in the room with you and feel them breathing. They were just as close to you, but you'd play the whole scene to a mirror that was right next to. So all those scenes with me and Annie at the end, everything, we're looking into a mirror, and the incredible thing was, you didn't feel that at all.
While the guys are off doing their big hero stuff, there are families left behind to wait and watch the horizon. This is where both movies show their true colours. In Wolfgang Petersen's Troy, the women waiting at home are treated as tragic observers of a doom they can't escape. Take Hector's wife, Andromache. She is completely drowning in grief. She knows her husband is likely going to die. Her city is going to fall, and she's basically draped in muted, dark tones, anticipating her loss. The waiting is just a slow, depressing march toward tragedy, as she's practically begging Hector to walk away from his duties. Alright, let's talk about the giant characters in both movies, because every ancient epic needs some kind of massive physical threat, but the way that these two films do it is completely different. In Troy, the giant is a guy named Boagrius, and he's just a massive, muscular human. There's no magic, no fantasy, just a guy who happens to be built like a brick wall.
The Thessalonian you're fighting. He's the biggest man I've ever seen. I wouldn't want to fight him.
Achilles takes him out in like 5 seconds with that famous flying leap to make that fight look super close and dangerous. The crew came up with a clever Hollywood trick. They rigged Brad Pitt's shield with actual fake spear tips that would physically pop out of it, and then used CGI to add the spear flying through the air. Here's how the crew described setting up that shot on set.
Made this so Brad can have the shield in his hand, do a tracking shot behind him, see in the distance the Boagrius character throw or mime to throw the spears. Visual effects would CG the movement of the spears, and we would have the tips come through the shield. One there, and one there, as close to Brad as he likes.
That's a pretty smart trick to keep the actor safe while making it look intense. But now look at Nolan's The Odyssey. He had a much crazier challenge. bringing the mythical one-eyed Cyclops to life. Usually a modern studio would just make the monster 100% CGI and call it a day, but Nolan absolutely hates that. He wanted the Cyclops to feel heavy, scary, and real. So the very first thing he did was call up actor Bill Irwin. Bill is this incredible physical actor who actually puppeteered and voiced the robot Tars in Interstellar. Nolan wanted a real person at the heart of the beast, so the other actors had someone real to look at and react to on set.
We were going to need every different technique in the book, from puppetry to animatronics to computer graphics and everything. But I knew that I needed a performer at the heart of that. Because a monster is never just a monster, and you have to look beyond that. You have to look for what this creature is as an individual, and that's what Bill was able to bring to the soul of the Cyclops.
But the real creepiness of Nolan's Cyclops is how he behaves. Nolan didn't want him roaring and acting like a cartoon monster. Instead, he showed Bill Irwin a super dark, famous painting by Francisco Goya of a giant eating his own children. He wanted the Cyclops to have this totally chilling, blank expression on his face. The horror doesn't come from him being angry. It comes from the fact that he doesn't think he's a monster at all. He just thinks humans are totally irrelevant snack food. It's that empty, unblinking look that completely freaks you out.
But one of the things that's really horrifying about it, we talked about it a lot, is that the blankness of the expression. That this is not a monster. Nobody thinks they're a monster. And that's what actually makes it most frightening, is that if from the monster's point of view, they're not monsters. We're irrelevant to them, and that's what's really scary.
And the physical reality of shooting this was absolutely insane. Instead of putting Bill in a motion capture suit on a comfortable stage, they filmed in a real massive cave in Greece with real sheep. Poor Bill had to hike up a steep mountain goat path every single day just to act out the scene in person, so Matt Damon could react to a real voice. So here's the difference. Troy gives us a cool, clean action scene where the giant is just a physical boss fight for Achilles to win. But Nolan's Odyssey gives us a psychological nightmare. He makes you feel like you are actually trapped in a dark, dirty cave with a terrifying force that you can't talk your way out of. One is a cool stunt, the other is pure dread. How these two movies want us to remember them. In Troy, it's all about individual glory and leaving a mark that can't be erased. Achilles literally runs towards his own doom because he can't resist the chance to leave a monument and be remembered as a historical character. But for Nolan, legacy isn't about some macho race against death. He is way more fascinated by the power of stories to survive across thousands of years of human culture.
I had no idea about this whole world. I mean, how would these design look like? How does a temple in 1250 look like? Or the city of Troy?
A lot of this, though, was what the production design people came up with, and they had to combine research with imagination.
You have your moments on these productions where you get overwhelmed by the art direction and by the set design.
I felt it. I had goosebumps. It's just one of these things you really think you're there.
Nigel Phelps, he had enormous knowledge about the time, and his first drawings were just beautiful, and they were digging themselves into all kind of books and research material in British Museum. I was just fascinated by what they came up with.
In Troy, the characters think the only way to cheat death is to have their actions carved into the stone. They want people to sing songs about them, but Nolan looks at the Odyssey and geeks out over the fact that this story survived as oral poetry for hundreds of years before anyone ever wrote a single word down. He's sitting there wondering if cinema, which is only a century old, can actually achieve the same kind of timeless connection with audiences. He wants to keep that childhood sense of wonder alive, using the giant screen to transport us. With both Wolfgang Petersen and Christopher Nolan, the pursuit of epic storytelling demanded an absolute commitment to tactile, physical reality, but the way they achieved this reality on set highlights two completely different philosophies of filmmaking. In 2004, Troy relied on thousands of human bodies colliding in harsh desert heat, where the actors themselves had to undergo intense physical training to become convincing warriors.
We were just a week before finishing this movie. We had just the big fight between Hector and Achilles left. We want to do it at the very end. so that all the other big scenes are out of the way. We can completely concentrate now on the physical work. So no character work anymore for the actors. Yeah. And right when we were ready to do that, a hurricane came and destroyed almost all of the wall of Troy with the gate and everything. An unbelievably huge set. And the fight had to take place right in front of this wall. And we decided there's no other way than rebuilding the whole set again. It took weeks and weeks, of course.
Hurricane came in, wiped out the wall of Troy. Plus, I got injured that weekend.
To create the legendary bone-crushing showdown between Hector and Achilles, actors Brad Pitt and Eric Bana refused to hide behind stunt doubles. Every spear throw, shield block, and sword swing was real, leading to a highly physical shoot.
We made a pact before we did that fight scene together to just not look after each other too much, because we knew that for the fight to be as great as we wanted it to be, it would mean that we were going to hit each other and we were going to have to take some risk.
We were really geared up for that one. I mean, at that point, it's confusing who you're rooting for. You're kind of rooting for both.
The doctor told him, you cannot work for weeks and weeks. I think we finished production sometime in September or so. Finally, Brad was ready to do this fight in the mid of December. And it worked. This is the monumental fight.
Action.
Even if we saw 50,000 already against 25,000, this between these two is the most spectacular and the most fascinating and frightening of them all.
You see absolute rage versus someone of absolute respect.
I've seen this moment in my dreams.
The Hector character represents equality. He is under attack from someone who has pinned all his life's frustrations and anger on this one man. And he's going to make him pay. He's going to destroy him.
There are no pacts between lions and men.
The fight scenes themselves, I know they spent months and months and months choreographing them, and we obviously spent a lot of time actually learning them, but I think the hardest part is the work that they put into creating them, because they needed to choreograph fights not only look spectacular and that work, but that actors can do.
And action.
While Troy found its physicality in the dirt, sweat, and bruises of classic Hollywood sword fighting, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey had to find its reality on the open, pitching waves of the ocean. Nolan travelled to Norway to secure a genuine Viking ship. He had the vessel meticulously rebuilt to match Bronze Age Greek specifications, entirely constructed out of wood. But having a real 100-ton wood ship was only half the battle. Nolan's stellar cast actually had to learn how to operate it, forming an authentic brotherhood born from physical exhaustion.
In between scenes, you might be doing something like changing your shoelace, and you look down, you think, no one will ever see that grouting, but someone's actually paid attention to that. And the amount of effort and detail that goes into it, it's you kind of feel a bit guilty.
Most sets that I've been on, things will look good from about 10 feet away, which means they'll look okay on camera, but when you get up close, you can see that it's, that's fiberglass. I mean, I would be standing right next to it and looking at these blocks of stone, and they still look completely real.
At the heart of both films lies a monumental challenge: how to translate ancient Bronze Age myths, where gods directly manipulate human lives, for a modern, contemporary audience. Both directors chose realism, but their execution represents two fundamentally different artistic philosophies. One chose to banish the divine entirely, while the other chose to make the fantastical terrifyingly physical. In Troy, Petersen completely removed the active presence of the gods, stripping the myth down to human politics, power struggles, and physical combat. Achilles' divine lineage is dismissed as mere battlefield rumor, framing him as a brilliant but mortal soldier.
They say your mother is an immortal goddess. They say you can't be killed.
I wouldn't be bothering with the shield then, would I?
In contrast, Nolan's The Odyssey embraces the fantastical elements of Homer's poem, monsters, magic, and active deities, but grounds them in psychological gravity. Instead of removing the gods, Nolan forces his mortals to reckon with the terrifying, realistic cost of encountering the supernatural. This creates two radically different definitions of mortality. Petersen's Troy relies on historical demythification, aiming for a gritty sword and sandals epic, where human glory is the only shield against death. Nolan's The Odyssey, however, relies on practical, tactile illusion, using real locations and physical animatronics, so that the mythic world feels as heavy and as dangerous as our own. There are two different filmmakers, tackling the same ancient legacy, but choosing entirely different paths to bring the Bronze Age to life. Epic storytelling on this scale demands an absolute surrender to physical reality, but Wolfgang Petersen and Christopher Nolan met entirely different obstacles in their pursuit of practical filmmaking. In 2004, Petersen chose to build a massive, stadium-sized recreation of the walls of Troy on a pristine beach in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. But building a stationary monument in a hostile climate is a dangerous gamble, and the production soon found themselves at the mercy of untamed weather. In contrast, Christopher Nolan opting instead to throw his cast and crew directly into the pitching waves of the open ocean, turning the elements themselves into a chaotic moving stage.
Bernard Shaw said, "No one has satisfactorily placed a boundary between myth and history." So you can see the enormous attractions, both of the story, the historical story, plus the myth.
Petersen's struggle was one of monumental reconstruction. Forced to rebuild his entire fortress after Hurricane Marty devastated the Mexican coastline, his battle was against the limits of physical architecture. In the face of natural disaster, for Nolan, the challenge was not about conquering a location, but surviving it by taking a genuine wooden Viking vessel from Norway and repurposing it into an ancient Greek warship. Nolan forced his production into a literal maritime expedition. There were no green screens to hide behind. The sea provided a three-dimensional reality that shaped the very performance of the actors. This commitment to the genuine physical toll of the ancient world extended directly to how both directors trained their actors for combat.
By the time we get to the Achilles-Hector fight, which to me is it's something, I think it's one of the great showdowns. And it unfolds slowly, and it's almost balletic until, of course, you almost forget that someone's got to go.
In Troy, physical realism meant grueling choreography on the hot sand, where actors Brad Pitt and Eric Bana performed their own stunts to ensure the audience felt the strategy and danger of a sword and shield duel. Their struggle was highly localized, a balletic, bone-crunching collision of two men on dirt. But the Odyssey, the physical preparation of the cast, went far beyond stunt choreography. Nolan's actors had to embed with a professional sailing crew for months, learning to rig, row, and navigate a 100-ton wooden vessel through rough seas. Petersen gave us the brutal impact of a sword hitting a shield. Nolan gave us the exhausting collective labor of men trying to pull their way home. The production divide highlights how each director chose to capture the sack of the city. Petersen's climax is built around a physical spectacle of fire. Because Malta's sets were constructed out of stone, his crew integrated vast wooden scaffolding and market stalls purely so they could burn the backlot. Nolan's climax, however, uses the horse to launch the Odyssey's complex, non-linear structure. Nolan plunges the audience directly into the subjective terror of the men running through a burning city, emphasizing the heavy psychological trauma of what war does to human minds. Petersen built a magnificent monument to burn. Nolan built a psychological cage to survive. The ultimate question of legacy. How does a story survive across millennia? And how do we measure the permanence of our achievements? In Wolfgang Petersen's Troy, legacy is an individual desperate sprint against death, a hunger for immortal fame that can only be carved into stone through battlefield glory. Achilles chooses a short, violent life because he cannot resist the chance to leave a mark and be remembered as a historical character, even if he must run towards his own doom. But for Christopher Nolan, legacy in The the Odyssey is not about individual glory, but about the endurance of human connection, family, and the medium of storytelling itself. Nolan views the ancient oral tradition of Homer as a direct ancestor to cinema, questioning whether film can ever achieve the timeless permanence of the myths that inspired it.
And they make you think a lot about what endures in human culture. And whether or not film can have that kind of permanence as a medium. I mean, it's only about 100 years old, or is it fleeting like theatre? And I think in some ways it's too soon to say.
Odysseus' opening narration in Troy sets up a classical Bronze Age worldview where human memory is the only afterlife that matters. To be remembered is to survive.
Men are haunted by the vastness of eternity. And so we ask ourselves, will our actions echo across the centuries? Will strangers hear our names long after we're gone and wonder who we were, how bravely we fought, how fiercely we loved?
Petersen's movie is a monument to this philosophy, a grand practical spectacle constructed at the edge of the world to leave an indelible mark on cinematic history. Nolan's approach to the Odyssey, however, shifts the focus from individual monument building to the collective survival of the medium. For Nolan, the permanence of the story is found in how it is reinterpreted by each generation to meet the values and anxieties of their own time. He sees his entire career, from his childhood days of making Super 8 movies in the basement to his first spellbinding encounter with IMAX at age 16, as an ongoing quest to build a portal into another universe, using the modern church of the movie theatre to keep these ancient primal human truths alive.
If they ever tell my story, let them say I walked with giants. Men rise and fall like the winter wheat, but these names will never die. Let them say I lived in the time of Hector, breaker of horses. Let them say I lived in the time of Achilles.
Odysseus' final haunting voiceover in Troy seals the fate of its heroes in the amber of myth, a declaration of awe for the giants who defined an era of combat and honor. The movie ends in a pyre, with the ashes of Troy settling into history, but for Christopher Nolan, the ultimate ending of the Odyssey is not a funeral pyre, but a continuation, a homecoming story of a family and love at its heart. It is a culmination of a 20-year journey that began when he first dreamed of the Trojan Horse sinking in the sand. By bringing his characters home, Nolan does not seek to end the myth, but he moves the cinematic language forward, contributing his own chapter to the grand, ongoing oral history of human storytelling.
I'd love to feel that I had added something to the body of work of all the filmmakers I've admired and that great film history that's developing. If I can play some part in moving the language of it forward somehow, that would be a great thing to be remembered for.
At the end of the day, Troy is a toast to the giant legends of the battlefield. It's about characters trying to escape oblivion by building massive physical monuments to their own glory.
Doing a movie on this scale with these thousands of people, with these sets that were almost unheard of, to shoot that in Malta, in Mexico afterwards, and you pull it off because of one reason. You have a fantastic project.
Nolan's Odyssey is a massive love letter to the act of storytelling itself. Wolfgang Petersen wanted to carve these heroes in stone so they would never be forgotten, but Nolan wanted to move the very language of film forward. 2 movies 20 years apart. If you like this video, subscribe and we'll see you in the next one.